All right. Welcome to the 95th episode of MVP Office Hours, where you can ask anything and everything related to Salesforce. I'm Jackie Travieso, and I'll be your host today, tag teaming with Dale Ziegler, who's going to monitor questions posted to chat. And on our slide here, we've got a list of events that are coming up. If you haven't heard of these events, you can Google them. And you've got our Twitter handles down at the bottom, along with how to find us on Twitter as far as MVP Office Hours itself. And let's go ahead and go to the next slide. So this is an open discussion. We meet the first and third Fridays of every month, with the exception of July 1st, being that is the 4th of July weekend. So there's no question or topic too big or too small. We are recording this, and we'll be posting it to both community and Twitter. If you haven't already done so, if you could please mute yourself. And then to ask questions, you can use the little raise your hand widget within ReadyTalk. And if you are asking a question or answering a question, if you could kindly announce yourself, that would be fantastic, so that we know who we are, whose voice we are hearing. Can I have the next slide? There we go. Today's special guest is Brian Kwong. Brian will be talking to us and tackling your process builder questions along with flow questions. You might know Brian as the Salesforce Wizard, and if you haven't yet subscribed to the Wizard Cast, hosted by both Brian and Mark Ross, you should definitely check it out. Some great information and some great entertainment. Brian, would you like to go ahead and say hello?
Hello. How are you?
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Brian. We're really glad to have you here today. On our next slide, just quickly, you'll see a list of all of the MVPs who have registered for today's panel, along with their Twitter handles, so that you can follow along and get the information that they're sharing out there in the Twitterverse. With that, let's go ahead and open it up to questions about anything and everything, just knowing that you've got a process builder and flow expert on the line. Someone's got to have a question.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
I guess it's Chandler Anderson with Digital Glue. I was wondering, basically, like, what do people think? What do some of the MVPs think are the best features of the new release, and maybe some hidden features that maybe weren't front and center on other release presentation stuff that maybe be good for admins?
Well, I have two favorites for me, and the first one is being able to have multiple true criteria as fire. So previously in Process Builder, the way it would work is it would find the very first criteria node that would evaluate the true, perform those actions, and then be done. But with the new update, there's an option that you can change to say, go do the actions for this criteria and then try the next criteria node, which makes doing some certain things in Process Builder a lot easier, instead of having to have multiple processes when you could have overlapping criteria or creating a really convoluted tree. Now you can just say, hey, if this is true, go check to make sure if anything else in the process is true as well. That's pretty nice. The other one that I'm beginning to really dig is the accounts for multiple contacts. So basically completely redoing how contact rows work with between contacts and accounts, so you can have this have a contact more easily associated with multiple accounts, and it's almost treated like a first-class object, so you can create as many custom fields as you want on it beforehand you would have to spin up your own custom object to handle it. So those are my two.
For me, this is Dale. Piggybacking on the contacts and multiple accounts, I work for the railroad, so I'm in the transportation side of things, and we work with a lot of brokers and third-party logistics companies that then represent on behalf of our customers. So it'll be nice to be able to link those broker agents to all of our different customers that they actually work with, because we do have email address on contact as a unique indicator. So that was giving us some fits, and need to play around with that still, but looking forward to being able to do that. And then the other one for me is no more tab limitations, unlimited tabs. I, as a solo admin, try to do as much of my work as an admin as possible in Salesforce, trying not to take data out into CSVs and access, all that kind of stuff. And so I use a lot of custom objects just for me as an admin. I had to create actually a shortcut object whose sole purpose in life is to be links to those custom objects that I couldn't put behind tabs. So now I can, which then means those records that I'll go to on tabbed objects will show up in recent items, and so I'm definitely looking forward to taking advantage of that.
Yeah, that was huge to me too. I kind of didn't realize with the new release I had heard about the custom tab limitation being lifted, but basically, I would install like a new unmanaged package and it wouldn't install because I was running out of tabs. It's like I had to go and delete old tabs. It was a mess. I think that's a huge feature for sure.
Absolutely, because that's one of those little known things. Like a lot of people don't acknowledge that the tab and the recent items are correlated to each other. So
interesting. Wait, what exactly do you mean? That's interesting. I didn't realize that.
So like when you're on either your home page or any tab, like when you click on a tab and you get to your recently viewed items, on the left you'll have recently viewed, or I'm sorry, when you toggle between apps,
right.
On your left you'll have recently viewed items. You'll only see recently viewed from the tabs in that app.
Right, exactly. I never even thought of that. And of course you only see recent items for things that have tabs in general. I know I'd observed that. That's interesting. I didn't realize it had to do with the app you're in. That's good stuff. I didn't even realize that. The more you know.
And I personally learned that the hard way when I had users saying, "Where is my record?" And I banged my head against the wall until I found that in one sentence in one section of documentation somewhere. So.
Yep, that's why I ask these kinds of questions. The stuff isn't obvious. That's good
exactly.
Stuff. Your trial and error has led me to learn something brand new without all of that. So thank you. That's good stuff.
Absolutely.
Great.
Great. We have questions. Yeah, we have questions from Atul on the chat board. Atul, if you want to go ahead and ask on bulkification.
Atul, you might be on mute.
I can also ask it, and maybe he's in listen only. How does Flow handle bulkification? And then are there any best practices for Flow from supporting bulk update standpoint? So, Brian, I think you might be able to take that one.
That's a good and very common question. So it's a little bit tricky to answer because it kind of depends on what you mean from bulkification. So Flow and Process Builder are technically bulkified, but they're not bulkified necessarily the same way as how you could classically bulkify a Apex code. So for an example, let's say we have a flow out there that we call every time we go and create an opportunity. And we go through and we upload 100 opportunities. What will happen is that you'll end up with 100 separate interviews, one for each opportunity we created. An interview is basically a launch of a flow. And it will work separately up until the point where you reach a particular element that can be quote-unquote bulkified. So, for example, like we're going to actually go and create a record, at which point all those other interviews will kind of get collapsed down, so the create happens as one big transaction instead of a whole bunch of separate transactions. And that's good from a limits standpoint because you're less likely to hit a limit because each time you create a record, you're doing a DML, and our ideal the ML limits into there. However, there's other types of bulkification that we can talk about. So, for example, with flow, if you have a situation where you are have a chance to create more than one record within your flow, you don't want to create them one-off. So, like, you wouldn't want to put a record create or a record update element within a loop where it's going to be called multiple times within your flow, because that's not going to be bulkified properly. You want to use S-object collections and use a fast create after your loop is completely done, so you're creating everything all at once instead of multiple times within the loop. That said, there's still some bulkification issues, and one of the things that is kind of confusing is it shares an apex element, which has to do with the number of characters that you can have in your SOQL queries. And I can't remember the number off the top of my head, but if you do a search for flow or process builder limits, I'm pretty sure it's going to be listed there. I could look for it, and we can post the link on the chat or in the community site after the fact. But there's some limits. So, for example, if you ever have a situation where you're going to be running something with thousands or millions of times, I would highly recommend not relying on flow to handle that, just simply because you can run the risk of hitting those limits. It is especially true if you're a complicated org or even a moderately complicated org, because flow is sharing the same limits as Apex. So if you have a situation where you have triggers written and are calling classes, and you have processes that are firing it, and you have flows firing, they're all sharing the same limit. And so you could run into the situation where doing a simple edit of one record could put you over those limits because you have so many different things firing. So it's important to know what automation you have going on in your org and how it's all connected, so you can make sure that your transactions are as streamlined as possible. You're welcome, Abdul. Hopefully that helps.
And Christy shared a help link, if everybody can see this, that I'll post it in the deck, as well as in the Success Community group afterwards, but it talks about limits for flow. So thank you, Christy.
And while you're doing that, Dale, I should mention that I do talk about flow quite a bit, including some limit ideas at thewizardnews.com, which is my blog and where I post all my training videos on flow and process builder, as well as our podcast.
Wizard News or The Wizard News?
The Wizard News. Yeah, if you go to Wizard News, you're going to learn a whole bunch about Harry Potter.
And I'm not going to be like Mark Ross, who calls you out for cheap plugs on your website. We appreciate it.
There's no such thing as a cheap plug.
Very true.
All right, does anybody else have questions?
This is Dennis with a question.
Go ahead, Dennis. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm just on my phone today. General question for a reports newbie in terms of how to create reports that track the different stages of the lead object and the opportunity object and the amount of time that elapses between each stage. And just if there's any tips and tricks on how to do that, and also if the stage were to go backward from stage 2 back to stage 1, can that be captured as well, the time elapsed? And then part 2 to my question is the bridging that chasm between lead and opportunity on reports. How can I create a report that determines the length of time, how long it took to convert a lead, and then how long it took to close that opportunity along with the different stages. So one is single object and the other one is lead plus opportunity object. Oh, my question makes sense.
Makes perfect sense. I'm sure other people have some suggestions, but I'm pretty sure for the opportunity there's a standard report for sales for stage duration that you can use that automatically keeps track of how long each opportunity was in each of your stages. And I believe it's cumulative. So if you went from prospecting to analysis and go back to prospecting, I'm pretty sure it's not counting those as two separate items. It's going to count that as the total amount of time it was in that stage, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, it is available in reporting, but what I have found is that it is not a thing in SOQL.
Right, because my guess is it's probably playing off of the stage history
Right.
that gets captured. Yeah. As for wanting to keep track of everything, like the whole lifestyle from the time that the lead gets created all the way to the close of the opportunity, you can get access to some of the converted lead information, so you could try it that way. The other way I've done this is I will map fields from the lead to the opportunity for conversion purposes. So, for example, I'll create a formula that it just pulls the created date of the lead, and then map that to a custom date field on the opportunity that represents when the lead gets created. So when it gets converted, it puts the date stamp of the created date from the lead directly on the opportunity, which makes reporting easier. And you can do the same thing for doing conversions as well. Because I'm pretty sure the converted date may already be there.
So what would that formula look like, for example, in just plain English?
Sure. It would be a real simple formula. So you would create a new formula field, and then you do that on the lead. And all that formula field is going to say in the box is literally the words created date with no space. The easiest way to do it is if you're using the advanced formula wizard, which I'm sure Dale's going to show here as soon as he types in, is that if you hit the insert field, it'll give you a list of all the fields that you can just select the created date from here. Okay. Yep. And then once this formula is created, you have a custom field, just a date field on your opportunity, and then you would map that formula field to that custom date field. And the reason why you have to do a formula field is because created date is a standard field on the leads, and for whatever reason, we're not allowed to map that standard field to something else.
Okay, thanks. I can't see if you guys are typing anything, but I'll try. If you are, I'll have to try to check it out later. But that's very helpful.
Yeah, and if you have issues, come back to the group and post a question.
Thanks.
And then also, Brian, going back to the stage duration, I'm not completely sure if that is available in custom report types. It may only be the standard reports for opportunities.
Okay.
Maybe. I'm going to poke in here real fast, but
I think you're right. I think the stage duration is only I think it's a standard report. So
is that a standard field, or what is the stage duration field? I'm not familiar with that.
So it's not a field. So stage duration, there's a history field on opportunities that keeps track of when the stages change by default.
I got you.
And they have a standard report. So if you just go into reports, Dale, I think it's a report that's created under administrative.
Sorry.
No, you're fine. Not a report type. It's an actual built report.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah. So it's one of the standard reports that comes with Salesforce. So if you just type duration under Find Reports and Dashboards.
Okay, I'm in the administration.
Yes. Select all folders and then duration. I know it's in there because I used it all the time. Yeah, I'll see if I can find it and get the exact word from it, because I remember it was something really, it was a funky matrix report.
Gotcha.
And I could have sworn it was a standard report that was already built into the system.
There was an opportunity history report type that was under the tree, but yeah, I mean, it sounds like you're talking about a specific report.
Yeah, I'll see if I can find it. Excuse me, quick here.
So yeah, just to confirm, the stage duration is not available on custom report types. Okay. Brian, your friend Alicia is up next, talking about, I believe, DML.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Brian again. So, yeah, my question is, do you have a workaround or just the best practice that you recommend for triggering, for the lack of a better term, processes in order? So if I have 4 or 3 different processes on the same object on edit, is there a way to make sure that they go in order and we can control that? Because right now they just do anything they want, and the only way I did it is just placed everything in the flow and then within the flow did the order, but I don't know if there is a better practice for that. Thank you.
So the answer is don't try it. Don't do it. I've seen some funky situations where people will go through and try to have processes call other processes. And with the tools that we have, it's just not reliable. If you have a situation where you have 3 processes running on the opportunities and you want to control what order things fire in, your best alternative is to create a new or create a process that's consolidating all 3 of them, and then have in the order that you would want things to fire show up as different criteria nodes. And the reason for that is because if they're in separate processes, you don't have control over what process fires first. If you have it all in one process, now that we have the capability of 1, sorting the criteria list, but 2, with Spring 16 being able to have more than 1 true fire actions within a process, you can handle this as one long process. Someone else playing music?
Sound like you got a little U2 going on or something.
Here I think I was finally getting my own theme music. I was kind of digging it. Yeah, so there really isn't a good way to handle it when you have multiple processes. It's better if you have really strict needs for when things fire to have everything in one area, or do exactly what you're doing, which is using the process and then having flow do the various actions that you need in order. Essentially, you need to have something that manages all the different actions in the order to call it. So if you're doing it declarative, the best thing to do is either do it in flow or do it in one big process. Otherwise, you're talking about writing some code and having the code say, okay, go out and do this, wait for it to be done, then go out and do that.
Gotcha. Thank you so much. I do have 2 more questions, so I don't know if someone else wants to go before me, or can I just shoot it?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. So my second question is, what is your recommendation of best practices for debugging processes specifically? So for the flows, you can convert it to a user-generated flow, create a button, just a placeholder, and then put as many debug screens as you want to figure out what's going on. But for the process, it's not as simple, and if errors usually come up, they have this ID, and then there is no way to figure out what ID. At least I wasn't able to easily find what process relates to which ID. So are there any recommendations here of how do you troubleshoot a process?
Yeah, there's a few things to do. So this is a little funky. The good thing is if you're familiar with Flow, this is going to be a little bit easier. Not easy, but a little bit easier if you had no clue about Flow. Because Process Builder is really Flow on built with a little bit more of a friendlier UI. And it basically means that all the errors that get generated are going to be errors on in flow language. So things that you can do is take a look at the debug logs, make sure your workflow is set to finer or finer, and you'll be able to see when process builder is being fired, what process is being fired, and what's happening when someone edits a record. If you get that error where it says basically unhandled exception and they give you an ID, you can actually use that ID to open it up in Flow. And there's a little trick to this. So the way that you do it is you want to go to a flow that you already have built and simply open it. And what happens is in the URL, it looks like something like salesforce.com/designer/designer.apex, apex, blah, 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 blah. ID equals, and then what we would expect a normal ID. It starts with 301. And if you paste the ID that you got in the error, it should still take you to the flow page that Process Builder is actually creating behind the scenes. And it should have the name of the process directly in there. Instead of the flow name, it should actually have the name of the process. So you can see what the flow is the Process Builder is using to create it, and then that kind of can give you some inkling on where things are going. Typically speaking, though, when errors are happening in Process Builder, they usually fall into a handful of simple categories. The most common one is that the person who fired the process or who edited or created the record doesn't have visibility rights to either the objects that you're trying to create or update or the fields that you are either updating or referencing. So Process Builder and Flow fire off of the user permissions. So they have to be able to see all the objects and all the fields that you're updating. It's not like workflow rules where you can update a page or update a field that the user doesn't have field level security visibility permissions to it. So that's the most common issue. The second thing that usually comes up with Process Builder is I almost never run into it anymore, but it's usually an error where something has gotten changed outside of the process that impacts the process. So like common one that happens when I do it is I go do something in the flow that's being used as an action, and Process Builder tries to call the flow, and the flow errors up because I made an error in the flow and I didn't test it properly. But I would say out of most of the errors that come out, 8 out of the 10 times it's due to user permission issues.
There's great information. Thank you so much. And the last question, I don't know whether there's a good answer to it. So non-programmatically, so we're excluding Apex and triggers of Visualforce pages, is there a way to send or call an email template? Right, so the way we send an email right now, the send button, but we want to make it a little smarter. So we want to maybe default a few items and maybe make it a little bit more dynamic, and ideally even choose an attachment from notes and attachment section from the same record. Is there a chance that this is possible to do?
So you want the user to be able to click on something and potentially choose an email template and make some modifications and then send an email.
Yeah, so I want the template, for example, I would default which template based, let's say, on the profile or some other criteria, and maybe even have, so ideally, yes, around the attachment, really.
So the answer is it depends. If you're using Lightning Experience, the new fancy UI that Salesforce has been putting out there for the last few releases, the answer is I don't think so. Not off the top of my head. If you're using Classic, there is a URL hack that you can create that will allow people to click a button and you can have it automatically take them to the send email page, select a template automatically, as well as populate who you want to be the recipients. So that's possible, but only in Classic, and URL hacks are not officially supported by Salesforce and do not work in Lightning Experience. But if you want to learn how to do that, I did write a blog post on it, and I'll see if I can dig it up and share it in the chat.
But anything about attachments at all?
The attachments, I can't remember if you could do the attachment part in the URL hack or not. I think you can actually. I just don't remember off the top of my head what the parameter is. But if it's going to be a standard attachment where you always want the same file to be sent, then that can be actually sent as part of the email template.
Yeah, so the same file can be sent with email template, but we want it to be dynamic based on the record. So let's say in one opportunity there is this quote attached, right?
Yeah.
Or I don't think that's exactly the scenario. This question came from my colleague. But the idea is that we want to dynamically pull it from the notes and attachment for that specific record.
That's a tough question because you're talking about needing to grab the ID from someplace else, and I'm not sure you're going to actually have the reference of what that document ID, that attachment ID is. So I think it's possible to automatically have an attachment selected. I don't think it's possible with the URL hack to do it without any sort of code, because you have to have a way to grab. You have to have a way to grab what that attachment ID is.
Gotcha. That makes sense. All right. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
So going back a couple of steps to the where Brian, you were talking about getting the error message, copying the 301 ID, whatever the key, the prefix is. So Chandler posted in the chat, and I have a similar question. Are there any resources online that detail the trick regarding getting to the flow from the error via ID? And then my question is, from a SOQL querying standpoint, is there an object that actually lets you query information about or on flows and process builders?
I don't think there's an object for you to query if you're trying to get at an error that a flow's having, but you are able to access interviews or the flows themselves from Apex. But that usually that case is to say, hey, you want to launch a flow from Apex and then get potentially results coming back from flow. But I don't think there's a way to be able to say, hey, go grab the error from a particular flow in Apex.
Well, not necessarily the error, but just information like all of your flows, detail records on your flows and your process builders.
I'm not sure if it's available in what you would query, but flows are pretty much all called interviews.
Okay. On my other screen, I was running data loader and found flow definition, or no, flow interview, and 0 records returned I know is horribly incorrect for my org. So I was trying to really quickly trial and error it, but I didn't know if there was some obscure named object out there that really is the meat of that information. But Chandler's question specifically, are there any resources online that detail the trick regarding getting to the flow from, so you answered that, the error via ID. So, okay.
Yeah, in the flow interview, that's for like active flows. So like if someone had a flow that was in progress or paused.
Okay.
That's why it doesn't show up in your org, Dale.
Gotcha.
Right. I'm just kind of asking like what you were explaining with getting the URL and going directly to the flow with the URL. It was a lot of stuff that it might be useful to me, but like it kind of was a lot of stuff at once. So I was wondering if maybe it was written out somewhere. It'd be good to be able to access it online and see if I could use it.
Not that I'm aware of, but I think you just gave me an idea for a blog post.
Cool. Yeah, I'll read that blog post.
And slightly off.
This is Alicia, if I can jump in very quickly. So I don't know if it's helpful to what you guys are trying to achieve, but I was just decided to check the workbench. And in the workbench, there's actually a metadata type of flow and flow definition. And you can see some of the metadata behind it, so the ID, last modified, because I know for me it was a big challenge to figure out whose last modified was created process specifically because it's just not showing on the UI who's done it. So this is also some information that is sits in the workbench that you can search.
That's true, except for it's a metadata, so you can't actually query flow definition. So you
can query it. That's right. You just have to go.
Yeah. So if you're familiar with the metadata API, you can get access to it. But yeah, the one you want to look at, Dale, is flow definition. The next one down. And under components, that should be a list of all the flows.
Gotcha. And this is just my dev org attached to Trailhead, so.
Yeah, I've always found it really difficult to get to the flow section of the setup. It's always kind of a pain compared to like a lot of other stuff that you can quickly get to. It doesn't ever show up in the most recently like access setup setup items. I know it's just like always one of those things I got to dig a few steps deeper to get to. It might be actually helpful to use Workbench maybe to jump to some of these flows. It's pretty good. It's a good suggestion to look it up in Workbench.
Brian, because you do seem to be fairly well connected to the product managers at Salesforce, do you have Safe Harbor any insight on some experience enhancements that might be in the pipe on things like that? Because I mean, it is kind of a pain to get to some of that information through the setup screens.
No, I don't have any insider information. With Safe Harbor stuff that can be shared.
Right.
I think the challenge that we have is that the people who handle certain aspects of this that work on different teams. So like the folks who manage flow really don't have any control over whether or not flow is going to show up in the recent items list because that's done by a different team. But it's a great idea, and I agree with you. It should be done. I would love not to have to go to quick find, hit flow, click flow, look at the list, and then look at the versions or hit open, especially if I'm going back to edit the same flow over and over again. It'd be nice to have it in that in the setup recent list. Sounds like a good idea for the idea exchange if it's not already out there. But if you want to use the Workbench, you could use Workbench. So if you hover over the ID for one of your flows there, Dale, there's a link there that says View in Salesforce, and it will take you directly to the flow page for that.
Gotcha.
Wait, in the Workbench?
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah,
so
I'm trying to do that. It takes me to don't have the permissions. Wait, actually, it's giving me something now. Maybe it's taking me to Process Builder. Oh wow. Let's see what it just takes me to the Process Builder app. This one.
Well, that might be because the one that you picked happens to be a flow created by Process Builder.
Right. I was in flow definition and I saw that. It took me to Process Builder. Let's see if I go to one of these other ones. I'll see what happens.
All right. Well, that was some very great conversation there. I think I learned some things, at least exposed to some things. Any other questions? I have one that's probably very introductory, but Brian, as you know, I'm just now getting to play with Process Builder because I've been living in PE clients for the last year and a half. So with Process Builder, simple question, is there when you're creating an email alert and attaching that to a step within Process Builder, is there some kind of hidden checkbox anywhere or anything that wouldn't be standard in the old traditional way of setting up an email alert and then dropping it into a workflow? Is there anything different in Process Builder that isn't exposed at the highest level?
The biggest thing with email alerts with Process Builder is, unlike workflow rules, you don't have the option to be in the workflow rule and then create the email alert. You have to have the email alert already created and available, and then you can be in your process to select it as an action. I think that's the biggest difference between the two. Otherwise, an email alert is going to work the same regardless if it's a workflow rule or Process Builder that's firing it.
Perfect. Okay, great. Thank you.
I actually was trying to. I'm in the flows section of Workbench and trying to do the view in Salesforce on the IDs, and it gives me a insufficient privileges page. And I mean, I'm a top level admin, so I'm not really sure.
Maybe someone did something and didn't tell you about it. Yeah, I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah, it's just a 301 level 301 ID. Starts off with 301 directly there. It doesn't. It says
yeah.
Well, so what's the difference between 300 and 301? Because like I'm looking at, personally, this is mine. This first one is a flow. This one's a process builder. They both start 300. What's 301?
I'm looking under flow in the metadata. There's flow and flow definition are two separate things. This is flow that I was clicking. And then it looks like the flow definitions are more, from what I'm seeing, the process builders.
Yeah.
So flow definitions.
Well, so here's what it is. Okay. So flow definition is the equivalent to the main page of flow. So Dale, can you just go back to your flow page that you had?
Like actually in the setup?
Last tab. Yeah, it was your last tab there.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then click on New Customer Flow. So this page is the equivalent to flow definition. And if you look in the URL, we can see the 300 item. All right. So you'll notice we have flow versions, and we can have multiple different versions of these. And flow versions is 301. So think of this as a related list. All right. So when you actually open up a version, you're looking at a 301 ID, but it's related to a 300 ID. So that's why when I was talking about earlier about trying to debug a process builder, when you get that ID error, the error ID isn't a flow definition error. It's the ID for the version that is causing the problem. So you would paste that ID up into this URL in order to open up the flow and actually see it.
Okay, yeah, I think I know what you're talking about now. It actually makes a lot of more things clear. Even like what I asked earlier with how you do the URL and stuff. That really makes a lot of sense. That's great info to have. I think
the reason you get an insufficient permission error when you use the flow is because you're trying to open up the record of that 301, and that doesn't really work. You have to go into that weird URL that's designer and designer.a blah, blah, blah in order to view it.
That makes sense. That makes total sense.
So Brian, since we seem to have a lull in questions, Squire has his hand raised actually.
Uh-oh.
No, it's an easy one. And I wouldn't be MVP if I didn't bring something up. We have a trigger in place. We use SSO, automated user generation process. Because of some of our internal tools, we require a contact associated with the user in order to generate some of the workflows and things. And so we have a trigger in place that after user is created, it creates the contact. Everything works great. There's been some asks for additional functionality and changes, and now that Process Builder has taken the next step, I'd like to deactivate that trigger and put it back into Process Builder. But I'm trying to remember if there's a reason why I didn't do that to begin with. Is there something about system objects and contacts similar to how app futures don't work, and are you have to use that feature to get the trigger to do that work?
Yeah. So yeah, you're right, Squire. The issue is that Process Builder and Flow fires based on the system permissions. So if there are some really limited things that you can do with it when you're talking about trying to like update the user record, because depending on what's calling it, if you're not in that system, running as that system user, it's going to fail. I'm trying to think of what was the last time I used to try to update the user record, if I have ever bothered to try to do. I think everything I've ever come to when it's coming to actually updating the user record, I just went and used code, because you can make sure that's always firing the system perspective and not a user's.
So to clarify though, but we're going from user to contact, not the other direction. Does that matter?
Oh, so you're not updating the user record, you're updating a contact record?
Yeah, I mean, in general, a user comes in, the user gets created, it searches for the email, and if that email doesn't exist, it creates a contact and links the two. And so that way we can work on the contact to update the user. You know, the admins can control user settings, and those are just
Are you using the contact field that's on the user record, though, to link them?
No, it has to be the other direction due to what the functionality is. It has to be the contact has a. But like I said, we had to use triggers the first time because you couldn't automatically have the user create the contact. You had to use that future. But I thought there was something else.
I don't see why you couldn't. I mean, it would have to be a combination of a Process Builder and Flow, because you won't be able to do the search for the contact outside of, or just in Process Builder.
Yeah, and that's okay. We can definitely jump into Flow just to see if one exists. But okay, well then I'll throw a dart at it. I just wanted to make sure before I started that I didn't paint myself into a corner.
Yeah, I can't think of anything off the top of my head.
And I don't know if
This is Alicia again. I just wanted to say that we've just done exactly the same thing. Not just a few months ago, that we've rebuilt the same trigger where we go from the user, create a contact, link them together, update information from a user to a contact only, and it's working beautifully so far. We haven't had any issues with that.
And then you used a trigger, you said?
We used to use trigger. We've rebuilt with Process and Flow.
Awesome. All right.
Yep. And I'll say on my org, I created a junction object between user and contact that I have a flow on the user record that plays with that to do various other things when I onboard and offboard a user. But I know there is that contact link on user, but I just made an object dedicated to combining user and contact record. So.
Got it. Excellent. Thank you, everybody.
All right, we've got about 9 minutes left. Any other questions? And it can be about anything Salesforce related.
As a member of the core planning team, who's coming to Midwest Streaming in a month?
I am.
I'll see you there.
I hope so, Brian. You're slated to do your podcast. You better show up. Woohoo.
Christy.
Who's the me?
Christy.
Hey, Christy.
Guzman. Hello.
I didn't know you were unmuted. Well, for anybody who's interested, it's not confined to just people in the Midwest region. Anybody and everybody is welcome, but fun times for 2 days, July 21st, 22nd at Navy Pier in Chicago, MidwestStreamin.com. And there's an entire breakout session dedicated to Brian and Mark doing their podcast live with the incredibly amazing Erica Cool.
Actually, Erica unfortunately won't be doing it. So, yeah, she has to be back for in the office Friday morning.
Gotcha.
So we will have someone else equally amazing.
Gotcha.
Or we'll just have to settle for Dale.
You know, as the content manager, I'm going to be running around all 33 sessions, making sure laptops and AV and wired connections and all that stuff work. So I might actually be a pretty entertaining interview, frazzled and chicken with my head cut off. So you might have some fun with that.
And the abstract never said how long the interview was going to be.
It might just be me popping in randomly to say, "Does everything still work? Okay, great." And then come back a couple minutes later. "Everything's still working? Okay, great."
We did get a chat question.
Yes. How does MVP nomination work?
There's a form, isn't there?
There is
is.
a form.
Yes.
Yep, there is a form. It's a short form.
And it's an incredibly short URL to get there, too.
And are you looking for questions about how to submit a nomination, or are you looking for information on how one becomes an MVP? Dale's got the form up on the screen now. So you can just complete that form. If you've got somebody in your Salesforce life who is doing amazing support, community contributions, community givebacks, this would be the place where you would nominate them for their contributions. And as far as things that one does to kind of go down the MVP path, I guess, if you will, I can tell you that all of our MVPs are the type of people that do not have the goal or did not have the goal of becoming an MVP. They gave to the community because it was something that was near and dear to their heart. They learned something from others, so they decided to also give back, and it becomes a passion, and you just continue to give because you get the bug and you want others to benefit from your trials and tribulations and the information that you have learned. So my suggestion is you just continue to support your community, whether that's on Twitter, your user groups, through blogs, podcasts, or some other avenue that has not yet been determined or invented. So feel free to create.
There is no wrong way to do it.
Correct.
I guess another question I would have is I don't know. It seems like this is something that'd be cool, to go a path to go down. Like, how do you promote something to people that may not be aware of the MVP nomination? How do you promote the MVP, the fact that MVP exists, and that people can be and that you can be nominated for it without being like, please nominate me for this? I guess it kind of has to be within the community then, right? Because most people won't know it exists.
Sure. So there's lots of things that you can do. I mean, because you've got all of your social media channels. If you and just asking others to promote it because of the content that you are generating, not because you are doing it, but because there is value in what one is generating. So we promote things that we see all the time that are beneficial to us, or beneficial to others who have asked questions of us, and we come across some sort of interesting article or connecting people within the community. So there's all kinds of ways to do it. The final answer is just being true to community and doing it because it's something that is near and dear to your heart as far as community give back, not because you're looking for recognition for it. And if you are a community giver, then that just comes naturally.
And
yeah,
and the community is so tightly connected that someone's going to notice that you're doing it and will submit a nomination on your behalf. It's very hard to only have a few connections in this community. So.
Well, for the record, I'm not interested in being MVP, so don't even. I'll just do it because I want to do it. Just heads up, guys.
Oh yeah. No,
and
absolutely.
if you need any support in trying to get started, or you're not sure, or if you discover that you have skills that you want to hone, if you're looking to learn how to write blog posts or do podcasts, we can certainly hook you up with people that do that. And you should always feel free to reach out to anybody who are doing those types of things to say, hey, I'd love to get started doing this. Can you give me a couple of tips? Because
I've actually.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I started a blog called doitinsalesforce.com, and that's actually the name of the URL. So I got that, and I have one blog post or two blog posts up there, and still working on number 3. Oh God.
This is embarrassing.
I thought we'd handled this.
I work for a company that has several layers of security on it, so I would not worry too much about this.
I got it too, so I would maybe worry.
Okay.
No, we literally just don't even go to it, I guess. No, we literally I ran into this. I thought we'd fix this. All right, guys, WordPress really is not very secure, so.
Right.
That's kind of the bottom line on that. I was
Well,
really
keep
worried.
us posted.
I thought we had fixed it. I fixed it with our webmaster, and then this happened again. So. Oh.
Well, keep us posted because we will definitely check back and check out the content that you're sharing.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
you can promote it once the malware is gone. You guys can promote the site, so I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I want to take.
If I can add one more thing to that conversation, because I'm kind of in the same boat. That my users aren't aware that MVP exists. I tend to use the conversation about how important the success community is to even the base user, not just to admins, not just developers, not just potential MVPs, and usually punctuate that conversation with, and the people that are the most valuable or envisioned as the most valuable are kind of heralded with this title, and you punctuate the conversation of how important the success community is as not just Reddit for Salesforce, but something bigger, and then you kind of have this value identifier at the end of it. It's really helped communicate to my internal users how important the whole program and the success community is.
That's great. Thank you. That's Squire, right?
Yep.
Thank you so much. That's fantastic. Well, folks, we are at the top of the hour, 3 o'clock. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Brian, very much appreciate all of the knowledge that you dropped on us. Fantastic. Our next meeting is scheduled for July 17th. Dale, can you go to the next slide, please?
Oh, yeah, that'd probably help.
And we will be visited by Jeff Gross. He will be your resource for Sales Cloud. So that's his gig. So we hope to see you on, it's July 15th. I said the date wrong. Again, we're not meeting the first Friday of the month. So hope that you and your families all have an enjoyable Independence Day weekend. And again, thank you so much for joining us, everyone. We will see you next time.
Thank you.